So, good evening to all my professor and my senior. Today, my topic of presentation is on the clinical feature and the management of groin hernia. And the objective of this seminar is know the clinical feature of each groin hernia and the management of it. I will start my presentation by naming out the types of groin hernia, which are the inguinal hernia, femoral hernia, and obturator hernia. Again, the inguinal hernia is further divided into direct inguinal hernia and indirect inguinal hernia based on their location. In the upcoming slides, I'll be discussing about the history, the symptoms and sign of each groin hernia and how the each characteristic feature of each groin hernia differentiate between one another. This picture shows a rough idea about the location of the groin hernia, in which we can notice the inguinal hernia, femoral hernia, and obturator hernia, which are very close to each other or one another. So I'll start with the clinical feature. The age. The age of the patient gives a rough idea about the type of hernia the patient has got. In case of indirect inguinal hernia, which is more common in younger age group, roughly at their second and third decade of their life. Whereas in case of direct obturator hernia and femoral hernia, which are more common in the older age group at their fifth and sixth decade of their life. To be very specific, the femoral hernia is more common in multiparous women in their fourth and fifth decade of their life. Next comes a complaint, that is pain. Pain is the most common feature that is experienced in all type of hernia. To be specific, pain is the first symptom that the patient complained about before the swelling even starts to appear. And the type of the pain that the patient experiences is usually dragging and aching type of pain, in which the patient experiences the pain throughout the abdomen. But this is not the same in every cases. The table completely turns in case of obturator hernia, in which the patient complains of a specific symptom, that is a painful limb movement. This occurs because when the obturator hernia herniates, it herniates between the obturator membrane and the superior pubic rami. This space not only allow the hernia content to herniate, but it also contains a very specific set of nerve called as obturator nerve, which on compression leads to obturator neuropathy, in which the patient experiences the pain and paresthesia in the medial side of the thigh. Along with it, the patient experiences a special type of referred pain to the knee joint that is called as Auship-Romberg sign. This occurs because once the obturator nerve comes out through the obturator foramen, it gives a specific branch called as geniculate nerve, which supplies the knee joint. Next comes the swelling. There are certain sets of questions that is thrown upon the patient in order to arrive at the diagnostic destination. The set of questions include: how did it start? Usually the patient complained that he or she has seen the swelling for the first time while doing his Turner's activity. By Turner's activity, I mean like coughing, lifting heavy weights, or if the patient has difficulty in micturition, or if the patient experiences difficulty in passing stools, that is constipation. Next question is: where did it first appear? In case of inguinal hernia, the patient says that he or she has seen the swelling above the inguinal crease, and most of the times the inguinal hernia extends from the inguinal region to the scrotal area. In case of femoral hernia, the patient complains that he has noticed the swelling below the groin crease. But in case of obturator hernia, he or she just tell that he is experiencing the pain in the medial aspect of the thigh, or in some cases the swelling can be seen in the upper medial aspect of the thigh. Next question is: what was the size and extent when it was first seen? In case if the patient has seen the swelling directly at the bottom of the scrotum, it is usually a congenital type of indirect inguinal hernia. Even though the name suggests it is a congenital inguinal hernia, it can occur at any period of the life. But whereas in case of acquired variety, the patient complains that he or she noticed a small swelling which has developed over a period of time. Next question is, does it disappears automatically on lying down? This is a usual case in case of direct inguinal hernia, in which the swelling reduces automatically on lying down. But the scenario are not same in case of indirect femoral and obturator hernia, in which there is a difficulty for the swelling to automatically reduce. Next comes the systemic symptoms, which includes vomiting, severe abdominal pain, abdominal distension, and absolute constipation. These four symptoms gives the current status of the bowel within the hernial sac. Because in case of strangulated hernia or incarcerated hernia, the patient experiences the above mentioned symptoms. Next comes the local examination. Local examination not only...
Madan, can I stop here?
Yes, sir.
See, those are the questions, okay. See, the systemic symptoms suggest obstruction, what you are told.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
So, what are the questions we'll ask to the patient? Leading questions.
In case of obstruction, sir?
Any hernia. What are the precipitating factors?
So precipitating factors like whether the patient has a history of respiratory trouble or difficulty in micturition, or difficulty in passing stools.
So you have to ask for any chronic constipation.
Okay, sir.
And history suggestive of any urinary difficulty like prostatic hypertrophy.
Yes, sir.
Then any obstructive airway disease like asthma or chronic cough. Okay, whether sir. Patient is smoking.
Okay, sir.
No?
Yes, sir.
So all those things have to come in the history. Then only you can go to the examination.
Okay, sir.
So anything, anybody else want to add anything?
Well, basically the questionnaire should be in the layman terms, like cough, lifting weights, when it appears, when it reduces. All those things should be very simple and layman terms.
Okay, sir. Shall I continue, sir? Shall I continue, sir?
Continue.
Yeah, continue.
Next comes local examination. The local examination not only helps the surgeon to arrive at the exact diagnosis and type of hernia, it also gives a fair idea about the content the hernia holds. And the patient must always be examined in the standing position followed by supine position. In inspection, the size and shape of the swelling gives a rough idea about the type of hernia. In case of indirect inguinal hernia, usually the swelling takes a shape of a pyriform. But in case of a direct hernia, femoral and obturator hernia, the swelling takes a spherical shape. Next, it is the position and extent. It is a straightforward that in case of inguinal hernia, usually the swelling extends from the inguinal region to the scrotal region. In case of femoral hernia, usually the swelling appears below the inguinal ligament, followed by which it ascends up. Next, it is a visible peristalsis. This is very important point because there is a statement telling that in case of femoral hernia and obturator hernia, visible peristalsis is never seen. It is because of the thick covering that it has got right from the outer layer, the skin, the rich fatty layer, the campo fascia, and the next layer, scarpa, and the fascia lata. All these structures makes a peristalsis very difficult to look at. Next, it is the skin over the swelling. The skin over the swelling also gives the current status of the bowel. Because in case of uncomplicated hernia, the skin over the swelling is usually normal. But in case of complicated hernia, the skin over the swelling can be reddened or erythematous. The position of the penis. This is usually only important in case of inguinal hernia. It gives a rough idea about the volume of the hernia sac it contains. If it is too much big, usually the penis is pushed to the opposite side.
Okay, stop here. Vanita has some
Yes, sir.
questions. Vanita, come
Sir,
in.
regarding visible peristalsis, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, that can be seen in all the hernias which has bowel as a content, sir, or in obstructed hernias, sir?
No, visible peristalsis should not come in his findings. It's not a feature of inguinal hernia.
Yes, sir.
Initially, I thought he's talking about abdominal findings. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Visible peristalsis I have never seen in a inguinal hernia. And the size, shape, everything depends on the size of the hernia.
Yes, sir.
It's not all that always the inguinal hernia comes from the groin up to the scrotum. It may
Scrotum. Yes, sir.
not reach. Only complete hernias will reach.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
No?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Visible peristalsis you remove from that.
Okay, sir.
Right. Anything else, Vanita? Farooq?
That's it, sir.
Yeah, sir. Visible, that's it, sir.
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, sir. Next, it is the palpation. The most of the inspectory findings are usually confirmed by the palpation. To start with the position and extent. Usually, in case of a complete inguinal hernia, the content usually extends from the groin area to the scrotal area. In case of a femoral hernia, usually it extends, it is seen below the inguinal ligament or inguinal crease. But this is not the same scenario in every cases. If the swelling is just restricted to the groin area, it would be difficult to differentiate it between the inguinal hernia and the femoral hernia, in which a two important anatomical structure, that is a pubic tubercle and inguinal ligament, gives a fair idea about the type of hernia. In case of inguinal hernia, it usually lies above the inguinal ligament and medial to the pubic tubercle. In case of femoral hernia, it usually lies below the inguinal ligament and lateral to the pubic tubercle. Next point is to get above the swelling. To get above the swelling, differentiate inguinoscrotal swelling from scrotal swelling alone. In this test, the patient is made to stand with the root of with the thumb finger and the index finger. The root of the scrotum is held, and the surgeon tries to get above the swelling. Usually, the surgeon cannot get above the swelling in case of inguinal hernia. But if the surgeon is able to feel the spermatic cord structures or else round ligament in case of female, it is usually a scrotal swelling. Next is the consistency. Consistency of the swelling. It is usually duffy and granular in case if the content is omentum, and it is usually elastic if the content is intestine. Next, it is a relationship of the swelling to the testis and spermatic cord. This test will be able to differentiate the type of the hernia, whether it is a bubonocele or funicular and other varieties, in which the content of the hernia usually lies in front and lateral to the spermatic cord, and the testis is completely incorporated in case of bubonocele variety of inguinal hernia, but the testis is separately felt in case of funicular variety of inguinal hernia. Next, it is next to test, that is impulse and coughing and the swelling reducibility are the classical signs of a uncomplicated hernia. In impulse on coughing, if the swelling is not present, either the surgeon can place his finger over the superficial inguinal ring, or the root of the scrotum is held between the thumb finger and the index finger, and the patient is asked to cough, in which the hernial content is forced out of the superficial inguinal ring, and the index and the thumb finger are separated away from each other. And this is called as expansile impulse. This expansile impulse is absent in case of strangulated hernia, incarcerated hernia, or if the neck of the hernial sac is adhesed, or else if there is adhesion in the neck of the sac. And based on this technique, a special test called as Zeeman technique has been described, which differentiate between the direct hernia, indirect hernia, and femoral hernia, in which the surgeon places his index finger in the deep inguinal ring, which is half an inch above the mid-inguinal point, and the middle finger is placed in the superficial inguinal ring, that is 1 centimeter above and lateral to the pubic tubercle, and the ring finger is placed in the saphenous opening, that is 4 centimeter below and lateral to the pubic tubercle, and the patient is asked to cough. If the impulse is felt on the index finger, it is usually a case of indirect hernia. If the impulse is felt on the middle finger, it is a case of direct inguinal hernia. If the impulse is felt on the ring finger, it is a case of femoral hernia. Next, it is a swelling reducible. This not only is a classical sign of a uncomplicated hernia, but it also tells a rough idea about the content it holds. For example, in this test, once the swelling is present, the fundus of the hernia is held in one hand and it is gently squeezed, with the other hand guiding the content into the superficial inguinal ring. In case of enterosil, it makes a gurgling sound, and not only gurgling sound is a diagnostic of enterosil, but the initial part is difficult to reduce, but the later part is easy to reduce. But in case of omentosil, omentum as a content, the initial part is easily reduced, but the later part is difficult to reduce. Next, it is an invagination test. Invagination test again differentiate between a direct and indirect hernia, in which the surgeon places his little finger from the bottom of the scrotum, feeling the pubic tubercle, and from there he pushes his finger into the superficial inguinal ring, in which superficial inguinal ring, in which the surgeon must be able to feel the spermatic cord structures or round ligament in his nail fold, and the pulp of the finger must palpate the superficial inguinal ring, and the patient is asked to cough. If the cough impulse is present at the tip of the finger, it is a case of indirect hernia, and if the cough impulse is felt on the pulp of the finger, it is a case of direct hernia. Next, it is a ring occlusion test. Ring occlusion test usually is a confirmatory test which differentiate between the direct and indirect hernia, in which the surgeon puts his finger in the deep inguinal ring and the patient is again made to cough. If the hernial content are seen, it is usually a case of direct hernia. If it is not present, it is a case of indirect hernia.
Okay, we'll stop here. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You gave a lot of importance to whether it is direct hernia or indirect hernia.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what is the significance?
Sir, of knowing direct or indirect, sir?
Diagnosing whether it is direct or whether it is indirect. How it changes the management or prognosis or anything, how it helps you to treat the patient.
Yes, sir. Sir, indirect inguinal hernia is usually seen in younger age group, as mentioned before. It's because of the persistence of the process vaginalis, sir.
All right. How it helps you to treat the patient, or whether it's complications more or less. How is it?
Don't know, sir.
Vanita?
Sir, treatment part won't differ, sir.
Right.
And complications also won't differ, sir.
So how it's important to diagnose whether it is direct or indirect?
Sir, it makes a better communication for other surgeons to understand what the patient is going with, sir. knowing with whether it's a direct or indirect, it's a better way of communicating to the other surgeons who hasn't seen the patient.
Namita?
So one, as a PD student, they need to know. I think treatment is not deferred like Vanita said, but indirect could lead to more complications than direct hernia.
Right, like what?
Obstruction is more common.
Irreducibility, obstruction, right? Then pain.
Pain, yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
See, when there is a direct hernia, it's pushing the Hasselbalch triangle, and it's usually because of the muscle weakness. And larger contents can come. There is nothing to occlude or obstruct. So pain may not be much. It may not go for irreducibility. It may not go for obstruction unless it becomes very big.
Yes, okay, sir.
Indirect hernia can get obstructed
Complicated.
quickly and get complicated quickly. So that's why we have to operate, should not neglect any indirect inguinal hernia much. All right?
Okay, sir.
So
Okay,
that
sir.
can get complicated. Otherwise, in the surgical part, there is not much of difference because both the cases we put the mesh.
Okay, sir.
Okay, Farooq, you will take those questions
Yeah,
in
so
the
few
chat
questions
box,
today.
whatever
Yeah.
you ask him.
Vanita is asking, what are the disadvantages of deep ring occlusion test?
Sir, it should not be done in case of obstructed or strangulated hernia, sir.
Vanita,
Sir,
you want to tell?
Sir, that is false deep ring occlusion test, sir. Where you will get false
False and it
positive.
doesn't add more
False
to
positive.
the test actually.
So when will you do deep ring occlusion test? Is it required?
Sir, it is a confirmatory test to, yes, sir, it is required, sir.
Confirmatory test to?
Differentiate between the direct and
If you have
indirect
no.
hernia.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
these tests are not routinely done nowadays, but
Okay,
you
sir.
should know theoretical part of
All
it
the tests.
because it is uncomfortable to the patient also. Okay,
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
what's the other question, Farooq?
What are the tests you suggest for a complete inguinal hernia? Vanita is asking. In case of complete inguinal hernia, what test you will do?
Sir, get above the swelling.
Correct.
Right. So in the complete hernia, in hernia, you have to differentiate whether it is scrotal swelling or whether it is inguinal scrotal swelling.
Okay, sir.
That's all right with Vanita?
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay, next.
Namita is telling invagination and ring occlusion test is no more done nowadays.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay, but it's good that theory part you are told.
PG,
Okay, sir.
you need to know, but I don't think it's done anymore because it's more uncomfortable to the patient. So most of the examiners also don't ask for it.
Okay, ma'am.
You need to know in case a question comes.
Okay, ma'am.
But one test, I think deep ring occlusion test, if the swelling is reducible, it is one of the important tests, I think, sir, to differentiate between indirect and direct hernia.
Yes, sir.
Correct. In the smaller hernia, not a very big hernia.
Smaller, if the swelling is
Reducible.
reducible.
Yes,
Right.
So why all this thing is, if this is a direct hernia, sir, as you told, so sometimes you may not require surgery. So we can wait till the complication appears. If the patient is old or anything, they don't want to do surgery, you can wait in case of direct hernia.
Correct. Dr. Farooq is very correct because in an elderly person, not much of symptomatic, if it's a direct hernia, there is a role for conservative management. You need not operate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. Anything else?
That's
I
all,
was
sir.
about to say that in upcoming slides, sir, management.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, sir, no.
Okay. So in the examination, what tests you will do in a inguinal hernia patient? You will examine the patient in the supine position and also standing position. This is a very important thing. Okay.
Okay, sir.
And you will do the, what all tests you will do?
So the above mentioned test, sir.
All the tests, you know, you had told.
As I mean, yeah.
You have to recite.
Yeah, Mahesh.
I think you should tell actually, so you should detail exactly what are the tests he has to do
Sorry,
when
sir.
the examiner is. Just name important tests now, which you will do in the exam.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. So except
I think
ring
important
name the
test will
tests.
be one is the cough impulse test,
okay, sir.
and
Okay,
if it is a inguinal scrotal swelling, getting above the test.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah. Next.
If it is a reducible swelling, then all these things you need to tell the things.
Ring occlusion test.
Yes, sir.
If you do these 2-3 things, then you will come to know. If the examiner asks, then you should know how to do the Siemens technique.
Other tests.
okay, sir.
Sir, one more doubt I have, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, he has mentioned the relationship of the swelling to the testis and spermatic cord, sir.
Correct. There he
You
went.
have,
Something he told Bibunacil.
Yes, sir. That is a complete. It extends till the bottom of the scrotum, sir.
Bibunacil.
No, it is only between the deep and superficial inguinal ring. Any hernia is called bibunacil. Should not come out from the superficial inguinal ring.
Okay, sir.
No, Vanita?
Okay.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Other
Just a
relation.
new.
Madan,
Yes, sir.
what is the relationship of the indirect inguinal hernia to the spermatic cord?
It lies in front and lateral to the spermatic structure, sir.
Right. Okay. What is the relationship of the direct inguinal hernia to the spermatic cord?
It just lies above the spermatic cord, sir.
Not above.
No, medial.
Posterior.
Medially or laterally.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Fine, sir. Okay.
Pushes the spermatic cord to the front.
Spermatic cord and the inferior epigastric artery is the landmark there that he has to mention when he's mentioning the relation there.
The relationship.
I think he's coming for that later. No? Let us see. Okay. Proceed.
Okay, sir. Sir, in the upcoming slides, it shows the image of the techniques that I mentioned. This image shows the Siemens technique.
Right.
This image shows the invagination test.
Right.
This is the ring occlusion test. Sir, it is actually the image what is in there in the screen. It's actually wrong, but it gives a fair idea about how the ring occlusion test is done, sir.
Right. Yeah, it's now wrong.
Okay, sir. So next comes the investigation in the groin hernia. Usually a surgeon is able to arrive at the diagnosis at this point of time after all the surgeries, or after all the tests that has been performed. But in certain cases, like if the patient is complaining of an intermittent swelling, and after doing all the tests, no results have been found, or no swelling has been found, or in certain other cases where there is a, if the patient ends up in the emergency department with the strangulated or obstructed hernia with a severe abdominal pain, the test can't be performed. In certain other condition in which the surgeon thinks about the alternative diagnosis, like a malignant lymph node or a lymph node metastasis, or a abdominal mass tumor that is extending into the inguinal region, or in few other cases there can be differential diagnosis for a femoral swelling, which includes psoas abscess, the enlarged bursa of the psoas muscle, the enlarged lymph node, the femoral artery aneurysm, and the saphenous varix. In the last mentioned conditions, like the femoral artery aneurysm and saphenous varix, the patient usually complain about, the patient or tells that the swelling has gradually increased in size, and if a clinician asks for a cough impulse, the cough impulse is also present, at which point of time it leads to misdiagnosis. In these cases, the help of the imaging comes into play, which aids in the exact diagnosis of the type of the hernia, which includes ultrasound, CT, MRI, and herniagram. This image depicts the herniagram.
First, you go to ultrasound. Why do you want to do ultrasound? Go back.
Sir, sir, it is an easy and rapid test to.
No, what do you want to find in that?
So that as mentioned, sir, the type of hernia, sir,
Okay.
or the whether it's hypoechoic or hyperechoic in case of the differential diagnosis that is present,
Ultrasound of what you do?
or else a duplex ultrasound can be used to check the blood flow of the content.
No. You said ultrasound. Ultrasound of what you are doing?
Of the inguinal region, sir.
Right. Anything else you want to check in the ultrasound?
So the opposite side also must be checked, sir, since bilateral hernia are common.
Okay. Vanita?
Sir, one is size of the defect and the contents of the sac, sir. And then, as he said, it is unilateral or bilateral.
Right. When we do ultrasound in our department, what all we are asking in the ultrasound?
So
You look only for hernia?
So the
No, sir,
size
this
of the superficial inguinal canal ring.
post-void residuum, sir.
Right.
Sir, okay, sir. So if there is any prosthetic enlargement in case of male, sir.
Right. Anything else?
So don't know, sir.
Namita?
Size of the defect, content, and irreducibility,
Right.
and prostate.
Prostate. Okay. See, as Namita says, you have to look at the size, what are the contents, whether it's omentum,
Okay, sir.
small bowel, or it is any ascitic fluid.
Yes, okay,
Okay.
sir.
Then all these patients, especially if they are elderly male patients, you should assess the prostate and the residual volume of the urine.
Okay, sir.
And also always you are asking for the ultrasound abdomen and pelvis, because sometimes there may be ascites, liver disease.
Okay,
We
sir.
miss those things. Or sometimes there may be gallstones or ureteric stones, kidney stones. Patient may
Okay, sir.
see pain and you may look at hernia and operate, but patient may not be relieved. So
Okay, sir.
properly assess the abdomen, pelvis, and the inguinal, both inguinoscrotal region for while doing ultrasound. Many times when you do look at the hernia right side or left side, other side clinically it may not be evident, but ultrasound may show a hernia. So then that also we have to carefully assess whether it requires any surgery.
Okay, sir.
Ultrasound has a good role in hernia management, inguinal hernia management. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Right. Next is CT.
Yes, sir.
What's the role of CT?
So it can be. So it is done in elective patients to know the exact details. Whatever the mentioned in ultrasound, it gives explicit results when compared to the ultrasound.
So you'll do CT scan in every patient of inguinal hernia?
No, sir.
Vanita?
No, sir.
When do you do?
Whenever, in case of complications of hernia, sir, to see
Okay.
whether it is triangulated or obstructed.
Right. Anything else?
Or incarcerated.
Okay. So one is to assess the bowel.
Okay, sir.
If there is an obstruction, strangulation or anything. Other thing is in a very early hernia, okay, ultrasound may not show anything much, but patient may have pain in the inguinal region and you may not able to appreciate the hernia at all. And you want to evaluate that, what's the reason for that pain, whether it is hernia or something else. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
So a good contrast CT will be useful.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Same thing with the MRI also. Any
Okay,
other
sir.
thing you want to tell in the MRI? Any other reason to do?
Sportsman hernia, sir.
What's
Mainly.
early hernia?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any because of any trauma, soft
Right.
tissue trauma to see.
Those are the area things where CT and MRI will help.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Anything else, Mahesh, Farooq?
What is herniagram?
Yes,
What
yes.
you do?
Yeah.
Sir?
Cardiogram now.
What is herniagram?
I was about to tell, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, arniogram is a technique in which a contrast agent is injected inside the peritoneal cavity and a screening is made through X-ray. Sir, the image that is depicted on the left side of the image is a normal patient. The image that is depicted on the right side of the patient is a case of direct right-sided direct hernia, sir. So it gives the herniagram tells us about whether there is a bulge in the peritoneum. I mean the hernial sac and how far it extends.
More than
Sir,
bulge, the descent of the peritoneum.
yes, sir. Shall I continue, sir?
Yeah. When will you do herniagram?
Sir, herniagram is not done nowadays, sir. It's
Right.
only it's just for it is done in the past, sir. Now it's absolute, sir.
Okay. Then better not to include the herniagram
Herniagram.
in your investigation.
Okay, sir.
Theory,
Okay,
you can write herniagram was used to be done earlier.
Okay, sir.
Sometimes it will be done for sportsman hernia.
Yeah, CT, MRI, and very
Okay.
rarely herniagram. Right.
Sir, next it is I will make a brief talk on the classification of the hernia. From the early years, many surgeons have treated their patient for hernia, and there are many different names for hernia, and it makes a lot of confusion. For example, they used to call medial, lateral, oblique, direct, indirect, small, big. Many names have been there, which puts the other surgeon in a lot of confusion. There is a miscommunication that existed in the past, followed by which there were a lot of randomized trial to make a classification which makes the communication between the surgeons very good, as well as it gives a blueprint to exact extent to which the inguinal canal must be dissected and how much it should be, how much repair it should be made, and everything. There are 7 types of types in Gilbert's classification. So, type 1, type 2, type 3 are for indirect hernia. Type 4 and type 5 is for direct. Type 6 is for both direct and indirect, and type 7 is for femoral hernia. And a surgeon can make on this classification only after clinical examination, next ultrasound, and the next diagnostic laparoscopy. All these 3 must be made in order to make the classification, sir. Next, it is the management of groin hernia. Surgery is not always needed in case of inguinal hernia.
Madan,
Yes, sir.
whether laparoscopy is required to do the Gilbert's hernia classification?
Diagnostic laparoscopy, yes, sir. It is necessary, sir.
How it helps?
Sir, in case of type 3 Gilbert's hernia,
Okay.
there is a variety of sliding components, sir, which will be much more explicitly seen in diagnostic laparoscopy rather than ultrasound, sir.
So this is a classification after the surgery.
It is done before the surgery, sir. It is just for paper presentation and journal presentation, and to communicate with others, sir, to exactly what type of hernia the patient has and everything, sir.
No, there are better classification. No, NIHS
I think,
classification.
NIS also class, yes, sir. It's there, sir.
Bailey and Lowe, they have given new classification, I think, this about hernias, inguinal hernia.
Yes, sir.
So this
This is taken from Bailey and Love, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So first I will talk about the management and open surgeries that are done in inguinal hernia, followed by open surgeries that are done in case of femoral hernia, followed by the open surgeries that is done in case of obturator hernia, and later I will talk about the laparoscopic surgeries that are done. The management of inguinal hernia. First, it is a conservative management. Surgery is not necessarily need in every case. It is a safe practice. To do the conservative management in case of asymptomatic direct hernia in elderly patient, in which the conservative management outweighs the surgical technique or surgical repair. Next comes the open surgeries for inguinal hernia. There are many surgeries that have been done from the past to the present, and I've ascended and I've named it from the ascending to descending order. Initially, in the 18th century, the management of inguinal hernia is usually through herniotomy. In the early 18th century, they used to do herniotomy both for children as well as adults. But later, in the late 18th century, it is just confined to children's. In case of congenital inguinal hernia with a persistent process vaginalis, the content of the inguinal hernia are pushed inside or reduced, and later the excessive sac is excised without closing the defect. But the same herniotomy can't be done in adult because they required some kind of muscular support in the posterior inguinal wall to prevent the recurrence. And that's where the herniorrhaphy came into play. The technique of herniorrhaphy was introduced in the early 19th century by George Bassini, in which he has mentioned that the surgeon, once entering into the inguinal canal after opening the anterior wall of external oblique aponeurosis, and after dissecting the spermatic cord free, the conjoint tendon above and the inguinal ligament below must be sutured in interrupted fashion and strengthening the posterior wall of the inguinal canal to prevent the occurrence of direct and indirect hernia. Over the period of time, more than 150 varieties of Bassini's repair have been found out by many surgeons throughout the world with very little or minimal benefits out of it, except a Scholdi's repair, that is also called as a modified Bassini's repair, in which the Scholdi's repair, it has exactly incorporated the steps of the Bassini's repair along with the modification of few surgical techniques, in which the incision is made in the center of the fascia transversalis, extending from the deep inguinal ring to the pubic tubercle, and closing it in a double thick or two-layered posterior wall, all simply called as double breasting technique. So after the closing of the fascia transversalis in this fashion, again the external oblique aponeurosis is also closed in the similar fashion. The advantage of the Scholdi's repair when compared to the Bassini's repair is it has lesser recurrence rate. And in the latest journal, they mentioned about in the latest journal they mentioned that a 1 to 2 centimeter stump of external oblique aponeurosis must be isolated, that is present in front of the inguinal ligament. And this isolated stump of external oblique aponeurosis can be sutured between the conjoint tendon and the inguinal ligament, both at the medial and lateral end. I mean, that is a superficial and deep ring, which reinforces furthermore the posterior wall of the inguinal canal and prevents the recurrence of the inguinal hernia. This type of open suture repair is usually done in underdeveloped countries because the cost of mesh is very expensive. Next comes the open flat mesh repair.
What do you call that name?
Sir,
What is the name of that repair? What you just you mentioned, no?
Scholl-Disc repair, sir.
No. Taking a leaf of external oblique aponeurosis and
Sir,
strengthening the posterior wall.
sir, there is no name, sir. It was just articles that I went through while preparing
The
it, sir.
Sarda technique, sir.
Correct. It is called Desartas repair.
Oh, sir. Okay, sir. Okay. Desartas technique. Okay, sir.
No, you said shoulder repair is done only in underdeveloped countries. That is not true.
Okay, sir.
Where is Shoulder's clinic located?
Sir?
Shoulder's clinic.
Sir, don't know, sir.
Yeah, it's in Canada.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
A lot of people do it. What is the disadvantage with the shoulder's repair?
Sir, it
Tension.
has
Tension repair, sir.
So it causes the amount of tension.
And it also, when compared to the mesh repair, the recurrence is very high, sir.
Yeah, it's high and it requires lot of technically it's little difficult repair. So everybody cannot replicate the same results what Shoulder's clinic has.
Yes,
So
sir.
it is not easy for the younger surgeons and the trainees to learn. Whereas
Okay, sir.
in the Lichtenstein's mesh repair, you are putting totally a tension-free repair, and so it is easy to learn and replicate what seniors do. Youngsters also can do the same repair.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
So next it is a open flat mesh repair. In the late 19th centuries, a surgeon named Lichtenstein explained about a simple flat polypropylene mesh repair for inguinal surgeries, in which a mesh measuring around 8 into 15 centimeter is placed below the spermatic cord, and it is sutured between the conjoint tendon and the inguinal ligament. At the deep inguinal ring, the mesh is dissected and it is placed around the spermatic cord. Around the spermatic cord. This is Lichtenstein mesh repair. The advantage of Lichtenstein mesh repair when compared to the open suture technique is it has very less recurrence rate, and another thing is it has a speedy recovery process. Next it is the open plug device complex mesh repair. Sir, over a period of time, the surgeons and the medical industries came up with a creative idea and to improve the open mesh repair technique. That's where they came up with some innovative techniques called shaped mesh plug. It is mostly famous in European countries because it is easy to place this mesh inside the defect with a little fixation. And there were other mesh also that has been discovered and innovated, which is placed in the pre-peritoneal space. The surgeon dissects a deep inguinal ring and just goes beneath the muscle to enter the pre-peritoneal space to place this mesh. And there are certain other meshes that is called as two-layered mesh or hernia system. This kind of meshes can be placed below the fascia transversalis, that is underlay patch, and above the fascia transversalis, that is onlay patch. Sir, my voice is echoing to myself, sir. Just a second, sir.
All right, you can carry on. But okay, just go back to the previous slide. Is the plug repair still practiced?
Yes, sir. I was about to say, sir, my voice is echoing, sir. Just a second, sir. I will unmute and mute, sir.
Okay.
Sir. Yes, sir. Sir, now it's clear, sir. Sir, now there are many retrospective, many studies that have been conducted, but no studies have come to a conclusion that this type of techniques is superior to Lichtenstein mesh repair, sir.
What is the problem with the plug repair?
So it can slip out of the deep inguinal ring if it is placed, or it can form a meschoma, sir.
Yeah, it's not useful. The plug can slip off, recurrence rates are higher, and you are introducing more foreign body there. It can cause lot of other complications. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Can erode into vessel or the bowel.
Mm-hmm.
There
Yes,
are
sir.
a lot of litigations about this plug also. Okay. Next.
So next comes the open surgeries for femoral hernia. So this diagram illustrates three techniques that I will be mentioning now. I will start with the A, that is infrainguinal approach for femoral hernia. By the way, the femoral hernia always requires surgical management. Conservative management is of no word, because most of the femoral hernia, the complication rates are very high. So it is always managed surgically. In the low approach, that is the infrainguinal approach, it is also named as Lockwood surgery. A transfer incision is made in the swelling, and the hernia content are reduced, followed by which a continuous suture is placed between the inguinal ligament and the fascia that is underlying in the fascia underlying the bone. This kind of low approach, the Lockwood surgery, is usually done if the surgeon does not suspect the need of bowel resection. Next approach is the inguinal approach, which is called as Lothian approach. This kind of approach is usually done when the surgeon not only to treat the femoral hernia, but also when if we suspect the chances of inguinal hernia in the same patient, this kind of approach are made, in which the incision is similar to the Basini's approach. So once the surgeon has entered into the inguinal canal, the fascia transversalis is split open, underneath which the femoral hernia lies. It can be pulled out from above, or it can be pushed from below, followed by which the hernial, the femoral site can be sutured together, or a mesh can be placed. While closing the abdomen, the inguinal canal must be strengthened in the posterior wall, thereby preventing the inguinal hernia. Next, it is the eye approach. Eye approach, in the figure we can see a eye approach is called as McEvades approach. In the figure we can see the C, in which a vertical incision is placed lateral to the rectus abdominis. The anterior rectus sheath is dissected, and the rectus abdominis muscle are pushed medially, and the surgeon enters deep to the muscle, that is a preperitoneal space. Once the surgeon enters into the preperitoneal space, he reduces the content of femoral hernia, and through this technique, the surgeon can make an incision in the peritoneum to check the viability of the bowel. And the advantage of this technique is it is usually done in case of emergency obstructed or strangulated femoral hernia, in which the surgeon can make extensive incision in the peritoneum to check for the bowel viability.
So it's a laparotomy.
No, sir. It is open surgery, sir. McEvades approach, sir.
Yeah, in that you are opening the abdomen, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So which is the best approach for femoral hernia?
Sir, if it is a uncomplicated hernia, low approach, that is Lockwood approach, is advised, sir. If a surgeon suspect femoral hernia along with inguinal hernia, it is better to go with inguinal approach. In case of emergency, if it is a complex surgery too, and if there is a need of bowel resection, the surgeon can go with eye approach, that is a McEvades approach.
Yeah, most common nowadays is the inguinal approach.
Okay, sir.
Okay. But if you are doing a laparoscopy, then it is best to go through a laparoscopy and then pull the bowel back and then repair, and that is a better approach.
Okay, sir. Okay,
Okay,
sir.
next.
Few questions are there, sir.
Okay, you want to finish off? Okay, ask.
Vanita is asking, what is the difference between Stupa's repair and Neha's repair? Neha's repair.
Sir, Stopa's repair is usually done in case of bilateral inguinal hernia, sir, in which a subumbilical incision is made and a large mesh is placed to prevent bilateral inguinal hernia.
I think,
And
Namita, there are
sir.
so many repairs. We'll leave all that thing, no?
Yes, sir.
Already it's 8:30.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because I saw in both repairs, preperitoneal mesh will be placed, sir.
Yes.
So I didn't find the exact difference. What is there between those two, sir?
Okay. You want to tell?
No, I too don't know, sir.
Okay.
Answer for that.
Discuss another day.
Yes, sir.
Because inguinal hernia, there are many types of repairs. No?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, sir.
most important, he has to know the Lichtenstein's mesh repair. Basilis
Yes, sir.
repair is mainly the initial surgery.
Yes,
Then
sir.
the Chaudis repair, which he has understood,
Yes, sir.
and the Lichtenstein's mesh repair, then the laparoscopic repair.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll go next.
so next it is the open approach to the obturator hernia. In open approach to the obturator hernia, usually the incision is made in a laparotomy fashion, and the patient is placed in a Trendelenburg position. Usually the constricting factor here is the obturator fascia that prevents the reduction of hernia difficult, in which case a lateral incision can be placed along the nerve and vessel to reduce or to aid the reducing of the content, followed by which in this case a suture repair can't be done, because on one end there is an obturator fascia and on the other end there is a bone upon which nerves and vessel runs. So most of the time mesh is placed to repair the surgery. If the area is infected, or if the patient is not affordable to pay for the mesh, the broad ligament can be cut and can be placed in place of the mesh.
So it's a plasty you have to do.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Okay, sir.
right.
So finally comes
Borders of the obturator ring.
yes, sir. So superiorly it is by inferior pubic rami, sir,
Okay,
and inferiorly it is by obturator fascia, sir.
right.
The contents are obturator nerve and obturator vessel, sir.
Okay,
Sir, okay, and that's also.
right. Carry on.
So next, finally comes laparoscopic inguinal hernia repair. The technique has been described and has been extensively studied in a randomized trial. The total extraperitoneal approach is much used compared to the transabdominal approach. The aim of both the surgery is the surgeon reduces the hernial content and the hernial sac after entering into the abdomen, and placing a large mesh measuring 10 into 15 centimeter is placed over the retropubic space in the medially, and 5 centimeter lateral to the deep inguinal ring. In such way, it covers direct deep inguinal ring, superficial inguinal ring, the hernial sites for femoral hernia and obturator hernia. In simple, it covers the myopectineal orifice of Frouchard. In total extraperitoneal approach, the surgeon creates a space deep to the rectus abdominis muscle to enter the preperitoneal space, and from there the dissection is carried out. In transabdominal preperitoneal repair, the surgeon enters the abdomen, and at the neck of the hernial sac, a incision is made, and the peritoneum is dissected away from the muscle and enter the same exact space as total extraperitoneal repair, that is a uh, preperitoneal space, and from there the mesh is placed. So finally, it's the laparoscopy technique, laparoscopy approach for femoral hernia. So laparoscopy approach for femoral hernia is usually done in case of elective surgeries. In case of strangulated or incarcerated hernia, mostly the open approach are preferred. In case of obturator hernia, usually laparoscopy is much preferred than the open surgery because the placement of mesh is always needed.
Okay, just go back. What is TAAP you have written?
Sir, mistake, sir. Transabdominal preperitoneal repair, sir.
TAPP.
TAP, sir. TAPP, sir. Error, sir.
When TEP is preferred, when TAPP is preferred.
So I don't know, sir.
TAPP, Vanita?
Sir,
Yeah,
no, sir, I don't know, sir.
you too don't know. Okay, Namita?
What is it? PAPP?
When do you
Ma'am,
have
that is-
more TAPP than TEP?
Large hernias with adhesions and suspected irreducibility or obstruction, sir. Just to
Okay.
see the bubble better.
Madan? When you
sir, yes, sir.
TAPP, you are not, you said you are entering abdomen, you are entering the
Yes, sir.
peritoneal cavity.
Peritoneal cavity, sir.
Okay, so you can
Yes,
see
sir.
the bubble, especially larger hernias and all, you prefer TAPP than TEP.
Okay, sir.
So there are two more things you have to say. One is there is another thing called ETAP. Okay,
Okay, sir.
enhanced
Okay, sir.
view TEP. Also,
Okay, sir.
when there is a large hernia, you can do hybrid repair.
Okay, sir.
Hybrid repair, you can do laparoscopy, see inside, and if it's not possible to reduce, you can make a small incision outside, reduce it, adhesions release. If it is momentum has to be excised, you can excise, and then from inside you can put the mesh.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so
Okay, sir.
TEP, TAPP, ETAP, and the hybrid repair.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir,
For femoral obturator, all right, good. Next. I think you can skip that. All this you had to
sir,
last meeting.
yes, sir. That's all, sir. I came to the end of the seminar, sir.
Okay.
So can I make a comment, sir?
Yeah.
Sir, just
Vinay.
yes, sir. A couple of things from the beginning.
Hmm.
So, Madan, when you take a history,
Yes, sir.
when you present the negative history, it's useful to divide that into history to make a diagnosis, history to assess the etiology, and history to look for complications. So if you divide your negative history into these three things, then the chances
Okay.
of you missing something well is less. The second
Okay,
thing
sir.
is that there have been some guidelines that have been laid down for examiners to test during the practicals, and in that they have said that it is important to differentiate at a postgraduate level between a direct and an indirect hernia when you are presenting well in the practicals. If the hernia is reducible, there are only two tests that have to be done. One is the cough impulse and the ring occlusion test. The Siemens test and the finger invagination test needn't have to be done. If the hernia is not reducible, then you do the cough impulse, attempt axis once, and if possible, then you do that. If the hernia doesn't reduce, then you stop only at the cough impulse.
Good.
The next thing is ultrasound is I think the most the biggest value for doing an ultrasound is to look at the opposite side, because that is the only thing that is going to change the management between a bilateral hernia or a unilateral hernia. Rest of it is incidental, but the value of doing an ultrasound is to look for the opposite side. And I think the current recommendation is to use the EHS. That's what Namita told for
Okay, sir.
Classification.
classification, not NIHS, not Gilbert's.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
That's all, sir.